Hey everybody, it's me again, Jack Wallen, with another Linux 101. Only this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. Instead of talking to you, the Linux user, I want to talk to somebody else. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't listen, oh Linux lover. You should, because hopefully, fingers crossed, this will be a video that you'll want to share with those people that you know and love, or just know, that you're hoping to entice them over to the Linux side of things. Come on over. The water's warm. The desserts are sweet. Okay, that's out of the way. Let's get on with it, right? Hi, Windows users. I want you to know that you are welcome. You're always welcome here. No matter how long you've been using Windows, which version of Windows you're using, you're welcome here. Whether you're a grandchild, a child, a parent, an adult, a grandparent, you're welcome here. So let me tell you a little story. And I've mentioned this story quite a lot, but it bears repeating. Back in 1997, that's when I started using Linux. Prior to that, I was using Windows. I had a Pentium 75 with Windows 95 on it. And I used that for a couple years. But the entire time I used that computer, I felt frustrated because I was constantly having to defrag the hard drive. I was constantly having to try to tweak things to make it perform okay. And I was constantly having to deal with blue screens of death. The operating system would crash. Applications would crash. I would have to hard reset everything. It was just frustrating. And then I discovered Linux. Now, it wasn't easy. Back then, Linux was a challenge back then. And I, in my infinite wisdom, purchased Linux and thought, I'm just going to install it on the computer and try it. If I don't like it, I'll go back to Windows or whatever. So, you know where this is going, right? So I installed Linux on the computer and I booted up and I logged in and I was like, what? Okay. I see where this is going. I've got a long way to go to learn this, but I reboot and I think I'm going to boot back into Windows so I can do some more research. Guess what I did? I overwrote Windows. I no longer had a Windows operating system to use. The computer was simply Linux, and that was it. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of help. I felt like I was on my own. Now, that was kind of a good thing because I was forced to learn Linux. Unfortunately, I was forced to learn it kind of on my own. I did wind up hooking up with a person. I shouldn't say hook up because that has completely different meaning now. I was connected with someone who was ahead of me on the Linux curve, and he helped me with a few things. Eventually, what I discovered was very simple. Linux was just another operating system. Linux was just another way for me to interact with applications and the hardware. That's all it was. Windows and Linux served the same purpose. Now let me ask you this. It's not a trick question. What browser do you use? Web browser, that is. I guess if you say browser now, everybody assumes web browser. What web browser do you use? Let me guess. Probably either Chrome or Edge. Not Edge from U2, Microsoft Edge, the web browser. What if I told you that pretty much, on the surface, pretty much every web browser is the same? You open the app, you type in a URL, an address, hit enter, and blammo, the web page you were looking for opens up. You can do that with Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Zen browser, Opera, Vivaldi, brave, Tor, on and on and on. Essentially, you, the Windows user, could install any one of those web browsers, open it up, and immediately know how to use that web browser, at least in its basic functionality and form. It will be easy, right? Now let's think about this. What Office suite do you use? I'm guessing you either use MS Office, Office 365, one of those two, right? Maybe? Close? Okay. What if I told you it was the same thing? What if I told you that every Office suite functions in the same way? You open up the word processor, you write words, you save words, you print words, you share words, you edit words, blah, blah, bitty, blah. So, with that in mind, you, the Windows user, could install LibreOffice and immediately go, okay, I know how to use this. I type stuff and I save stuff. The UI might be a little different, but oh look, I can customize the UI in LibreOffice. I can make it look somewhat like MS Office. Okay, I can use this. Right? Right? The same thing holds true with your email client, with your image editor, and pretty much all other software. I like to relate it this way. Now, let's just say, pour exemple, that you grew up Catholic. You're a Catholic. Bam! You're a Catholic. Not really. So, you grew up Catholic. You know how the Catholic thing goes. You can walk into a Catholic church and do the Catholic thing. Because you know it. It's ingrained in you, right? But guess what? You could probably go to a Methodist church or a Baptist church or just about any kind of church and understand what's going on. Right? Go in, talking about Jesus, talking about God, talking about morals, talking about doing the right thing, talking about tithing, talking about whatever. It's pretty much the same thing. It all serves the same purpose, right? They just go about it in a different way. It's almost like each church has a different UI, a different interface to God. But you can go to any of those churches and immediately understand what's going on and get used to how they do their thing. Not that hard. Same thing with cars. You might drive a Jeep. You love your Jeep, right? You can get in it, start it, put it into drive, and go. Hit your turn signal, turn on the radio. Just don't text and drive. Well, guess what? You could jump into an Audi, a Mini Cooper, a Mercedes, a Pinto, back from the 70s, which my family actually owned, and you can drive them. Now, the only difference is if you drive a manual and you get into or if you drive an automatic and you get into a manual, you might be like, huh, what? Well, I can drive both, but I know a lot of people that cannot drive a stick. So that's a little bit different, sort of, but not. Because you can get into a stick and figure it out. Here's a little story. Story time. Back when in the 80s, when I got my license, we were very poor. I should have prefaced this by saying my family was very poor. So in the middle of the night, my dad drives me out into the country because he found someone who was selling a 67 Volkswagen Super Beetle for dirt cheap. And he bought it for me. That was my first car. It was a stick. And here's what my dad said to me. You press the pedal on the left, change gears, release the pedal, and press the accelerator. And when you hear the engine, will tell you need to press the left pedal and switch to the next gear. He said, do that until you're in the final gear and drive. Go home. That's it. He gave me those instructions, got in his truck, and left. I was alone with this little old lady that we bought the car from, and I had to figure out how to drive a stick in the middle of the night on the way home. And guess what? I made it. I made it safely. I ground the gears a little bit, but I made it. The same thing holds true with operating systems. As a Windows user, it's ingrained in you how that operating system works on the surface. I would venture to say that the vast majority of average users don't really understand what an operating system is and how it all works, but they know how to go through the motions of clicking the start button, finding the application they want to use, clicking that application so the application will open, using the application as needed. Something in my mouth. I know that's still there. I apologize. That's gross. It happens. This is like live theater here. And the app opens, you use the app until you're done, and then you close the app. Or you minimize the app, click on another app, and it opens up, and you go back and forth to multitask. Every operating system does that in almost the same way. They all have a semblance of a menu. Like in GNOME, you've got the app overview, but with KDE, you have the KDE menu. So you could essentially log into a Linux machine and understand, oh, okay, there's a desktop, there's a menu, there's a button down there in the bottom left corner. I'm used to that. I know what to do with that. I'll click that. Oh, look, there's a menu. And the menu has some favorites over here, and then it has some categories. Oh, look, there's Office. Oh, look, there's LibreOffice Writer. I need to write a paper for school, so let me click that. Oh, it opens. Oh, I can use this. I know how to use this. And you use it. You save your work, you print out your work, you take your work to the teacher and hand it in. The teacher says, oh, this is great work. Thank you. You didn't do that on Windows. You did that on Linux. You did it. And that's really what it all boils down to. They all serve the same purpose, and for the most part, they go about it on the surface in roughly the same way. Yes, there are subtle differences, and there are some not so subtle differences, but they all work the same way. You want to, let's say you're used to Windows 10 or 11, right? Or even maybe Mac OS, and you're used to, oh look, there's this little app store. Let's click the app store. Oh, I can find the apps I need, right? Oh, cool, I can install it. Click install. There it is. Guess what? Most Linux distributions have app stores. In fact, Linux did the app store before every other operating system. It was a little different. Like the if you've ever used the Synaptic package manager front end, it's a little rudimentary, but you can open it up, search for an application that you want to use, click install, and there you go. And Synaptic has been around for a long time. Even back then, you didn't have to use the terminal window to install applications. In fact, the terminal window is optional. I look at the terminal window as something to do admin tasks or some tasks more efficiently. You don't have to use it at all. So you can kind of forget about this concern regarding the terminal window. Just forget that. And the same thing with hardware, with peripherals. Now, Linux has a really, really bad reputation wherein a lot of people assume that peripherals won't work. Now, back in the day, that was very true. I remember times trying to get a laptop working with Linux and just struggling with it. And there are still instances where I'll try to install an a version of Linux on a laptop, and I say, oh, okay, sound's not working. I need to find the driver for this. Well, guess what? You have to do that with Windows too. You want to install a printer on Linux, you got to find the printer driver. You got to install the printer, or on Windows, I'm sorry. if you want to use a printer on Windows, we'll start over that. You want to use a printer on Windows, you plug the printer in, Windows doesn't detect it. You have to, the printer either came with software, you have to go to the printer's website, download the drivers for it, install the drivers, and then Windows will finally detect the printer. Well, with Linux, a lot of times you can plug the printer in. Like I have a Brother laser printer upstairs in my office. I have a Brother laser printer. I can plug that into almost any Linux distribution. It'll go, oh, that's a Brother laser printer. I gotcha. And it'll automatically set it up for me, and I'm printing right away. Now, there are other printers where I plug it in, I have to go, okay, well, I've got to find the driver for it. So that goes across operating systems. I've had to do it for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Find drivers for a particular peripheral, install it, and then use it. You're lucky if you plug the peripheral in and your operating system just goes, oh, I know that. I can use that. Here we go. I got your back. So using peripherals isn't any different than using them on Windows. There are, of course, occasions when you'll have a particular peripheral like a scanner. Scanners are notorious, where there's just no Linux driver for it. So that's just the way it is sometimes. Now, let's talk about installing Linux. First and foremost, when I first installed Linux back in '97, it was a slog fest. It was not easy. I had to use the fdisk command line to format the drive, partition the drive, and all that. And then once that was all done, then I was inserting floppy disk after floppy disk after floppy disk to install the operating system. Well, today's Linux is so much easier. In fact, I would argue that the latest version of Ubuntu 25.04, which is just in beta now, has probably the single best operating system installer I've ever used. It is so easy. Now, this is why I bring this up. If you are a Windows user and you would like to try Linux, but you don't have a spare heart machine, and you know that you want to at least keep Windows around until you're sure Linux is right for you, here's what you do. First of all, you download and install VirtualBox. Now, it's a virtual machine manager, but don't be afraid. It's actually really easy to use. You download and install VirtualBox on your operating system of choice, be it Windows or Mac OS. And then you download the ISO of Ubuntu desktop, either 24.0 for the LTS, or you can use the short-term release 25.04 in the beta. Okay, open up VirtualBox, click New, give it a name, and then on the ISO drop-down, you select the ISO image that you just downloaded, and then it will auto-populate everything else. Then you have to go into, I can't remember what it's called. One of them's hardware, and for the drive, and the other one is for the system. So I can't remember what they're called. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but the second from the top, you'll adjust the memory, so you'll give it like 3 or 5 gigs of RAM, and then you'll adjust this amount of CPU cores. You can just make it 2. And then for the hard disk, the bottom one, give it about 80 gigs just for fun, and then click Finish. Oh no, don't click Finish yet. Don't click, because what I'm trying to do is make this super easy for you. There's a little thing called unattended installation, and that, my friends, is very important here, because I'm trying to make the installation of Linux as simple as it gets for you. So expand the unaccompanied installation section, and this here you can set a username, a password for the user, the host name, and the domain. Once you've done that, click Finish, and then click Start. Here's what's going to happen, and this is super cool, and this is why I tell you to do it this way. The installation is just going to happen automatically. You're not going to have to do anything to install the operating system. Because you use the unattended installation, it's going to automatically use those parameters that you configured and install. The only thing you'll have to do is when the installation is finished, you click Reboot. and it'll reboot the virtual machine, and you'll end up in the login screen where you type the username that you added in the unattended installation and the password, hit enter, and you're logged in to Ubuntu Linux. That's it. That's how easy it is. And here's the beauty of this. It's a virtual machine, so it's not going to harm your main OS. Not going to do anything to it. In fact, you can use the virtual machine with Linux at the same time you're using Windows or Mac OS. You can go back and forth between them. And the reason why I tell you to do this is it's a great way to learn Linux while you still have Windows or Mac OS there to do your daily stuff. And eventually you'll realize you could do your daily stuff on Linux, and you might find yourself using Linux more as a virtual machine than you do the host, which would be Windows or Mac OS. And at that point you go, well, you know what? I like this better than I like Windows. I'm going to install it on my main computer. That's all there is to it. So you don't have to be afraid of at least trying Linux. And what you're going to find is that Linux is far more stable and reliable than Windows. It just is. And even better, it's not nearly as hard as you assumed it would be. That, my friends, I'm confident about. So, and even once you've logged into Ubuntu, you're going to figure out the desktop pretty quickly. Because on that left sidebar, you're going to see, oh, that's a Firefox icon. Firefox is a web browser. I know how to use a web browser. You open it up and you start using the web browser. And you go, oh, wait, there's a thing called software, the App Center. Let me open that up. Oh, I can install a bunch of software. I can install LibreOffice. I can open up LibreOffice. Oh, look, I can type my papers. You don't have to be afraid of Linux. It's just an operating system, and it behaves in a similar fashion to Windows and Mac OS. It really does. There's nothing to be afraid of. Again, the Linux community happily and gladly welcome you. Come on in. The water's warm. Come on. The tea is sweet. The biscuits are fluffy. The pizza's hot. We can all have a party together. Right? Right. And that's all I have to say about this. I'll probably say more about it later on. Because, you know, I love talking about Linux. And I love the idea of winning people over to Linux. Because Linux is where it's at. All the cool kids are using Linux. They really are. I guess that's calling myself a cool kid, and doesn't matter. Anyway, thank you so very much for spending a little bit of your time with me today, because it means the world to me. I'm not trying to make any money here on YouTube. I just want to help people. So, you know, click subscribe, click the alert thing or whatever if you want. If you don't, that's fine. Just keep coming back, because I got more to say. Thank you again, and I hope that you and everyone you know and love have a wonderful, wonderful day.